Don't say that.
I know. Alright, cool. Yeah, I'll just sit right here, I guess.
Okay. Are you going to be on screen?
I think so.
Okay.
Maybe like, just make sure real fast. Check the height. Yeah, I should.
About right here.
Yeah, I should be there. Perfect, perfect. So. Alright, cool. Alright, so yeah, I'm Michael with Save the Utah Pantages. Joining me today here is Connell O'Donovan. How's it going, Connell?
I'm fantabulous, thank
Fantabulous, nice,
you.
yeah. Lovely day here, and the pride flag waving above for Pride Month, so.
Woohoo! Thank you, Project Rainbow.
Yeah, that's so cool. They bring out like thousands of flags, right?
Yeah, you rent them for 2-3 weeks during June.
Oh, cool.
And then they have transgender flags for the week of transgender remembrance, which is October or November? I can't remember.
Okay, that's fantastic. So,
yeah.
Well, Connell's joining me today because he's been helping us with our Queens of Pantages series. Do you want to just introduce us to that a little bit and what that's all about?
Well, yeah, so I've been doing queer history since the 80s, late 80s, especially queer Utah history.
Yeah.
And one day I just thought, I wonder about female impersonation that happened here in Utah, because I knew there was some going on in vaudeville around the rest of the country. So I went to newspapers.com, which has early Utah papers digitized, typed in female impersonator, and here come hundreds of articles, and I'm like, what?
That's amazing.
No, and I start reading these things, and then I was absolutely blown away. So I started I kept a database, well, a spreadsheet, I should say, on all the drag queens that perform statewide anywhere in the state of Utah.
It's amazing.
And I've discovered that between 1871 and 1931, there were over 100, 80 of whom were national acts, and then about 20 who were locals.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of just had this idea, and then the newspaper articles, and then all the research that all the information that came back kind of led you to this project.
Right.
Okay.
And as part of the the spreadsheet, I kept track of which theater that they performed.
Okay.
in.
Cool.
And so when I saw you were doing the Pantages thing, I was like, wait, I have a lot of queens that performed at the old and the new Pantages Theaters. And so
when you reached out to me a few months ago, and I was kind of blown away by this too, because like I've known about some history of the Pantages, but what's so wild about it, there's so much that like we still don't, it's left to be like uncovered. But I know Babe Ruth performed there, Will Rogers, Abbott Costello, but some of these earlier acts in the 1910s and 20s, when it was still vaudeville, is always something I was super interested in finding out. So when you told me about this, I was kind of blown away as well. And I was like, this is so wild, and it's really cool to think about, really old queer history. This is like a century, 1870s, even farther back. But it's like,
150 years ago.
Yeah.
In Utah.
Yeah, exactly.
Places.
I guess that's where I was going. It's like you don't always realize it's like, oh yeah, there was queer people back then too, and it's kind of swept under the rug. And so it's really cool to unearth this information now and celebrate it.
Right.
So,
and what's so fascinating to me is this brings out such an interesting exploration of what gender means,
right,
and gender expression.
Right.
Now, so a lot of these men who performed were cisgender, heterosexual.
Right.
This was a job for them.
Right. Kind of like the old school acting where the men would play women roles as well.
Yeah, I mean that's a tradition in England, but we didn't have that in America.
Okay.
When American theater started, women were already legally allowed to play women's roles on stage, which wasn't the case in England.
Sure.
The female impersonation, it's actually really complicated and problematic because it started with blackface.
Right.
Blackface minstrelsy. with white men portraying African American women in a horribly racist and derogatory way, like really making fun of them.
Right.
And that started in the 1840s, before Utah.
Yeah.
And then eventually, these men who are portraying black women started to portray. One of the tropes was called the high yellow gal.
Oh, wow.
Who was basically a very light complexioned woman who could pass for white, but she was also quite elegant. And so that started this new kind of more of a trend toward portraying glamorous women.
Okay.
And then other men went, well, let's portray women,
Yeah.
white women.
That makes me think of that poster of Stuart the Male Patty, where that gown and just the extravagance of the necklaces and all that.
right. Just very much haute couture for that time.
And then he took the Patty from an opera singer. Is that right?
Stuart the Male Patty, right? Yeah. Adeline Patty was a really famous opera singer who performed a lot here in Salt Lake City. She was very popular here.
Okay.
And I think that's also one of the other queens that didn't perform at the Pantages was Brigham Young's son, Brigham Morris Young, and his drag name was Madame Patarini.
Right.
And I think he took Patarini from Adeline Patty, the opera singer.
She inspired quite a few performers.
Right.
That's interesting. So you're saying a chunk of these performers were cisgendered men just doing a job.
Right.
And then so that gets us to the other part of...
but some of them were queer.
Right.
One of the queens that I was researching, he had performed here in Salt Lake City, but stayed in drag and went down to Provo, to a saloon in Provo. This is in the 1880s.
Wow.
And tried to pick up men at the saloon.
That's some courage right there.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome.
And he got caught and arrested for being cross-dressed, not on a stage. So performing as a female impersonator was fine on stage,
right?
Where everybody knew,
it was acceptable, right?
That this was just entertainment. This was theater. But he transgressed that boundary and took it public out.
I think that's kind of what I found so fascinating about this history is, it's a very dangerous time to be a trans person, and then it seems like some of these performers found solace in performing, and the one chance they could be themselves on stage. But it's kind of a sad history for some of this stuff as well. But these shows were really popular, right? They were like sold out. And, big events.
Huge events. A couple were at the Tabernacle.
Wow.
Okay. And then starting in the 30s, with growing conservatism in America, you had the stock market crash, and you had the Dust Bowl,
the Depression,
the Dust Bowl and the Depression, and so American Christianity really started to entrench itself and say, we're messing up as a nation, we need to repent, and pointing fingers, going, vaudeville is one of the reasons.
Led us astray.
and female impersonation was definitely a part of that.
It kind of goes a little bit with the Red Scare, where we're like, this is American values, and we're fighting against communism.
Exactly. And so female impersonation stopped as a public form of entertainment for the straight gays. The gays, not gays.
Oh yeah. The straight gays.
For
I
the
see.
And because they were, even if they were queer, as female impersonators, they were performing for straight audiences.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. It kind of like in vaudeville was just a show and act, and then it kind of took on a different connotation within the LGBT community.
Right. With
an identity.
The public performance ended and it went underground.
Yeah.
And the queer community, especially the gay male community, embraced female impersonation as part of our culture.
Right.
You know.
That's awesome.
And so it would occur, but very underground, at usually mafia-run clubs.
Really?
You know.
That's a whole other conversation right there. That's interesting.
Yeah, only the mafia would dare let us have our bars.
So I'm when I was a kid, I used to love reading about true crime and all that kind of stuff. So I know quite a bit about the mafia. So I'm very curious on that dynamic. Because they like protect these performers, and it was a kind of so it was like very amicable relationship.
It was
to a degree.
There was antagonism, but it was symbiotic. You know,
that's fascinating.
As long as the mafia could make money off of us, they were fine. You know, and then they'd pay off the police to not raid, or they would make arrangements so that the police would only raid once a month. You know? And just and here it was the Greek mafia that controlled the gay bars in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And then, you know, in Stonewall,
right. I was
what
talk
was
about that.
The Italian mafia,
right,
the Stonewall, and
that goes in with Marcia, and then Sylvia Romero, right? Rivera, yeah. So, and then that's went underground, and then there's a kind of the re-emergence in the '60s with the counterculture,
right?
That time period,
and then with Stonewall, certainly, and with the police learning that they couldn't just
do this anymore,
and that there were political ramifications for them coming into bars and arresting people and publicizing our names, our employers, our addresses, you know, because that was just such a horrific practice. It was terrorism.
Absolutely. Very, very violent situation, and very dangerous. And that's kind of what, I'm, as a cis gender man, I kind of gravitate towards a lot of this stuff. I just see these performers and just like I admire them very greatly for their courage that they at time to do this when it was very dangerous. But then it's like, what else are you going to do besides try to be yourself as much as you can?
Right.
So I admire these performers very greatly. But and then that goes into the modern culture where drag's pretty much in the mainstream with
RuPaul Drag Race.
RuPaul Drag Race and stuff like this. And, going on, but and then again, there is some cisgendered people still doing drag, but then it goes into kind of the trans community as well, and there's different ramifications, different motivations, I guess, for these performers.
One of the trends that I love is cisgendered females doing drag. And being really fabulous at it. And I totally embrace that. I guess the first time I really thought about it was when Katie Lang dressed as kind of Marilyn Monroe.
The singer, right?
The lesbian singer from Canada, who's very butch. Always wears suits and cowboy boots and stuff. But she dressed as Marilyn Monroe for a performance once and did a really, blonde bimbo and it blew my mind. And I went, oh my God.
Well, what's interesting too is if you go back to more of a childlike innocence, it's I think most kids like dressing up and doing different characters and different things, and then as we grow up and find our identities and sexual identities, it becomes a different nature, and anyway, but I don't know where I was going with that, somewhere. But so I'm kind of curious too. So we'll go back to, so a lot of these performers performed at the Pantages, but your research went all the way back to 1870s. Where were some of these other places in Utah specifically?
Well, the theater that most queens performed at was the Salt Lake Theater, which is on State Street. The facade is still there. it became Promise Valley Playhouse
Right.
in the 70s, I think.
Right.
And I performed
Oh, wow.
on stage at Promise Valley Playhouse. I was in Promise Valley in
That's
1980.
fantastic.
But the LDS Church, it belongs to the LDS Church,
Okay.
and they kept the facade of the theater and then ripped out the bones of it. And it's, I think it's church offices or something
Right, yeah.
in there.
Yeah, it's interesting trying to, working to save the Pantages. We hear about all these other theaters. At the height of it, there was hundreds and hundreds of theaters down. Really, well, maybe not hundreds, but at least dozens of theaters down in Salt Lake. Hundreds across the state. But so I always hear about the Center, which was a little bit before my time. That was torn down. Promise Valley Playhouse. We talked about the Villa a lot, but it was just kind of interesting how booming the arts and things were with all these theaters and all these different acts going on, which is really fascinating to me. But so then let's talk specifically about some of the performers, I guess, at the Pantages for our event tonight.
Okay.
We're doing the premiering your short film about the Queens of the Pantages, and just run me through who were some of the performers that performed here.
Well, I mean, my favorite is Ariema, or also known as Francis Renaud.
Yeah, that's my favorite too.
Well, I love his whole story is really fascinating.
Yeah.
I believe he was queer. I think he was a gay man, and he never married.
Okay.
And I found one photograph of him kind of being intimate with another man.
Okay.
And it's captioned that it's his brother,
Oh.
but this man is probably 4 inches shorter than him. And I have all the military records of Friend Renaud and all of his brothers, and they were all 5'10".
Wow. Okay.
All of them.
So definitely not his
So
brother.
whoever this shorter man is, it's not his brother. And
that's interesting. And it kind of, goes into some of the secrets of the time, changing this is my brother in a photo, or it's just like keeping these secrets. And again, a very dangerous time to be openly and as a queer person. But Francis was the one on our poster with the 100 pounds of diamond gown, which is still amazing to me.
And the thing that I love most about that photo is if you look at it, he's not doing breasts. Like it's his male chest, and it's just like straight down. And you're like, wow, he's not really trying to pass as a woman.
Yeah.
He's not stuffing a bra or anything.
Right.
And so part of the whole trope of doing female impersonation is that you were trying to pass for the audience as a female, and then at the end of your act, you would doff your wig, and the whole audience would go, it's a man, but with him to come out on stage flat-chested like that, it's like, well, he's not really creating
he's
that
not really
image.
Performing. Yeah, just being himself on stage.
Yeah, so I just think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I love that photo. I think it's my favorite of all the Queens. It's just such a beautiful photo. Like the posing, the lighting, the gown. It's just immaculately done, and really, really amazing to see a photo like that. It's 100 years old.
And his nickname was the Parisian Fashion Plate.
Okay.
And,
I didn't know that.
And he had a $100,000 wardrobe.
Wow.
Which in the 1920s, I mean, that's got to be in the millions.
Yeah.
He would go to every haute couture designer in Europe and in America and have them fashion his gowns for him.
And then a little bit of history of the Pantages at the time too. All these theaters, there was the Rialto, the Fox Theaters back east, the Orpheum Theaters. They all had their circuit chains, right? So like Pantages, he built around, I think, around 10 theaters, but he had hundreds of theaters in his chain, so these performers would just, like a traveling circus to go around
the Pantages circuit.
Yeah, so I always was curious to find out, go do research on some of the other theaters and see who performed there, because it's most likely they performed at ours too. Flew through the circuit at different times. But anyway, and then the other great story about Francis I love is the one that's also on our poster with the crowd. where he transforms into a woman in front of like a glass store, and there's a crowd out on the street.
Yeah, on Main Street.
Yeah, and then he this is still amazing to me. Like I can't imagine the charisma for this, but and then he just takes the whole crowd with him, down to the Pantages for a matinee show.
Right.
It's such an unbelievable story.
I was stunned when I found that photo of the crowd.
Yeah.
Blocking all of Main Street.
Yeah.
There's got to be
Hundreds,
200 people at least watching him.
Yeah.
Put on his drag makeup and transform from a man to a woman.
It just shows the popularity of these shows, and
it was titillating.
Yeah,
and the scandal of it.
Right.